There we go. I had the update. So, hey, it's time for today's tax talk. I am your host. I'm attorney Stephen Leahy. Sometimes that sound gets me. I caught it right at the beginning. We are streaming live on Monday, the 15th, year of our Lord 2022. And we're talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, or now they're calling it the IRA. You've heard a lot of bad things about it. I've said a lot of bad things about it. But there are those out there saying good things about it, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Won't you join us? That's right. Again, there's lots of people. You got the NPR. You got some progressives out there. They love this thing. They just think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's going to solve all of our problems because we're going to tax the rich out of existence, and any financial problems we have going to be solved. We're going to be able to give everything to everyone, because that's what the Build Back Better plan was. There's lots in that Build Back Better plan that wasn't included in the Inflation Reduction Act, because the Inflation Reduction Act was just a small portion of that Build Back Better plan. They're very disappointed that they didn't get the Build Back Better, all of it, but they're pretty happy with what they got, which is inflation reduction. Or did there's a lot of things this bill is. Reducing inflation isn't one of them. It'll do a lot of things. It will not reduce inflation. I don't know if there's anybody that really believes that it will. But sometimes I think that when they come up with some of these names, it's about selling the act, not so much about describing it. And of course, that's what this is all about. So there's a couple good, I was going to say good stories. There's a couple stories. Let's talk about it. We're going to start with, NPR. Let's do that. So here's the first story from NPR. The IRS just got $80 billion to beef up. A big goal, going after rich tax dodgers. They could say it all they want. They really can't go after the rich. And before we get into the story, let's do the story, and then I'll finish with my explanation of why I think this is poppycock. Haven't used that word in a long time. So the IRS is about to get a big infusion of cash as part of the massive climate and health care bill passed by the House on Friday. So if it's a climate and health care bill where they're giving a lot of things away and their bill, where is the inflation reduction in that? I don't know. The tax collection agency is set to receive $80 billion over the next decade. Is that going to reduce inflation? And people could say, well, if they collect more money, they'll reduce inflation, perhaps. But are they going to start collecting more money this month, next year, 2 years, 5 years? How long is it going to take to start collecting on this money? That's something we'll talk about. Some of that money will go to update decades-old computer systems at the Internal Revenue Service, and some is for improving customer service, including a taxpayer phone line where 9 out of 10 calls go unanswered. Very little of this money is going to answer phone calls, and I don't know where they get that idea because it's not in the budget, that's for sure. Most of the money, though, is for stepped-up enforcement to help the IRS collect more than the estimated $600 billion in taxes that go unpaid every year, much of it owed by rich people who underreport their income. First, that it's not $600 billion. You hear estimates from $200 billion, $600 billion. When they really want to push it, they'll say it's $1 trillion. And that's if they collect every dollar that they ever thought that somebody should have paid. And oftentimes the IRS is wrong about the money that they should pay, right? They're just wrong. By beefing up the IRS's capacity to go after wealthy tax cheats, by the way, when they're building up their capacity, they can also go build up that capacity to go after not wealthy tax cheats or just the not wealthy. You don't even have to be a tax cheat. I don't know why we call the wealthy tax cheats. Well, they're not paying all their taxes. According to whom? I'd say the wealthy pay a good portion of all of our taxes. You're going to be able to collect at least $400 billion of that over the course of the next 10 years. And I suspect substantially more. Of course you suspect that. That's what the government always does. They always tell you things are going to cost less and they're going to get more. They always say that. But there's a bitter opposition from Republicans. The IRS funding passed Congress along strict party lines like the rest of the Inflation Reduction Act, like the Obamacare. Imagine IRS agents descending upon America like a swarm of locusts, said Ted Cruz, warned in an interview with Fox Business. And by the way, these IRS agents aren't there to go after billionaires. They're there to go after you. They're there to go after your small business. They're there to go after your family. I agree with him. Both Treasury Secretary Yellen and the commissioner who was appointed by insist that the additional enforcement efforts will target the wealthy and not middle-class taxpayers. As I mentioned before, both Yellen and Rettig are going to they'll be long gone before any of this starts panning out and they'll have any of these people start auditing people. How long does that take? Let's be clear about what these resources are and are not doing. These resources are not raising audits on the small business or any household that makes under $400,000 a year. We keep hearing that. But we know that's not true. The new money will help to reverse more than a decade of underfunding at the IRS. The agency enforcement ranks have shrunk by 30% since 2010. I've explained all this, right? The high point was in 1995. They had 114,000 employees. All returns were done manually. And over 25 or about 25% of their employees worked on processing tax returns. You don't have to process tax returns any longer. So that reduces their numbers that are required. And that's only in processing. It's in a lot of different areas. That's just tax returns. It's not to say about 941s, 940s, all of these. They're all done electronically now. You used to send those in by hand, and it took a lot of paperwork and manpower, people power, to process those returns. And experienced auditors have left. The IRS has increasingly focused on simpler audits involving lower income families, even though they account for a small share of unpaid taxes. I'm going to go into this because if it's because of experienced tax auditors have left, how long will it take to get an experienced auditor in the IRS? You can't just hire them. There aren't any experienced auditors available. They would be already working for the IRS. So how long does it take to get experience? When you hire a new one, first it's going to take a long time. They were given permission to cut all the red tape and get 10,000 new employees this year. Have they gotten 10,000 this year? I don't think so. So how long will it take to hire 20,000, 50,000, 80,000, whatever the number is? Let's say it's 25,000, the low end. How long will it take to hire the 25,000? Once they get hired, when will they become experienced auditors who aren't going to focus on lower income families? If you hire 25,000 that are unexperienced, won't they have to go after lower income families first to get the experience, to go after the middle income, and then to go after the rich? Isn't that the way it will work? That's my understanding. Researchers at Syracuse University found that 46% of IRS audits in the most recent fiscal year were aimed at people who received the Earned Income Tax Credit. That's because they're so easy to check, right? That's done electronically. You can check it. You match this, you match the numbers, and if they don't match, then that's called an audit. A tax break designed to supplement the income of low-wage workers. Because low-wage workers, they wouldn't cheat. Only the rich cheat. People who receive the tax credit were more than 3 times as likely to be audited as taxpayers overall, even though they account for a small share of unpaid taxes. They said that twice, right? Unpaid. They're a small share. They're an easy mark. Enforcement levels have really dropped, except for these poor lowest income group where you can just send a letter in the mail. As I mentioned, it's done electronically, correspondence audits. It doesn't take very much of the IRS workers' time. They send them a letter, and then they have to supplement or substantiate what they claimed. And if they can't substantiate it, then they don't get the money. Doesn't that make sense? Millionaires have largely avoided tax audits. At the same time, Long said, the IRS audited just 2.2% of millionaires' tax returns last year, a steep decline from 2015. What percentage of millionaires should be audited every year? Just a question. Most millionaires that don't even look at their returns, even though all of the studies show that that's where the money is. All the studies show that. The vast majority of ordinary wage earners already pay the taxes they owe. They don't have much choice since their income is reported directly to the IRS. So we shouldn't give anybody a choice because some people don't have a choice. And I think wrongly is that what we shouldn't give anybody a choice. And that's what they're really working on right now, to be quite honest with you. And that's what these information returns come from. Wealthy people have more opportunities to avoid taxes. Their income sources are often less transparent, and they can hire lawyers and accountants to sidestep the IRS, which is frequently outgunned. Not to sidestep the IRS, but to take them on head on, right? And because the IRS takes they take opinions that aren't substantiated, that are not, they can't verify, and they can't enforce. And so tax attorneys and accountants push back and say, no, that's not what the law is. That's what the IRS says the law is. But remember, the IRS interprets laws, and sometimes they interpret them incorrectly. And that's where attorneys come in. This has been a David and Goliath battle for too long. We're finally giving the IRS the tools it needs to be able to meaningfully police tax evasion at the top of the income distribution. Really. She argues that the stepped-up enforcement will not only enable the IRS to collect more money from the government, but also make the fairer tax system. Because that's really what we're worried about, the fairest tax system, not how much money we get. We know that. The government's told us that many times. This is about bringing it to an end to a two-tiered tax system where certain taxpayers have opportunity to evade and the other taxpayers are making good on their obligations and are fully voluntary compliant, which is a vast majority of taxpayers. So we have a two-tier. One is looking to evade the taxes, and the other one is not. They want to pay everything. I think there's one side that is trapped and has to pay everything, and there's one side that isn't. So they want to make it equal and trap everybody, and that's really what they're looking for. Here's I forget what site this is. Common Dreams, quality journalism, progressive values, direct to your inbox. Biggest win for tax fairness in decades. Progressives cheer reforms in IRA, demand more. While this bill establishes desperately needed changes to our tax laws and IRS funding, it is still a far cry away from the systematic changes that we need in our society to rectify the hold the rich still have on every level of our economy. And that'll change how? Following House Democrats' passage of the Inflation Reduction Act on Friday, progressives applauded the more significant changes in the federal tax code since 2017. Well, that's like yesterday. When Republicans, highly regressive and deeply unpopular to whom? Not those who got the tax relief, was welcomed by corporations and the wealthy, and anybody else who got a cut, and there was a lot of people got a cut. The former managing director of the investment firm BlackRock and now chair of the Patriotic Millionaires called the Inflation Reduction Act, which Joe Biden is expected to sign next week, the biggest win for tax fairness we've seen in decades. Really? You think tax fairness means hiring 87,000 new IRS employees? That's fairness? The IRS's 15% minimum tax on corporations with more than $1 billion in profits, 1% excise on stock buybacks, and increased funding for the Internal Revenue Service to strengthen enforcement against rampant tax evasion. Do we have rampant tax evasion? I don't think so. By rich individuals and firms. Provisions that would raise more than $700 billion. You see how the other one was, first they'd say it's $140 billion. Then they went to $200 billion. And then they were just talking about, $400 billion. And now they're talking about $700 billion in new revenue over a decade. Where does that number come from? Are strongly supported by voters and mark a significant step towards achieving economic equality. But while this bill establishes desperately needed changes to our tax laws and IRS funding, it is still a far cry from the systematic changes that we need in our society to rectify the hold the rich still have on every level of our economy. We need to take care that we don't let ourselves become complacent, he added. This is a step forward, but only one step in a long journey. We should use this win as an opportunity to revitalize the fight for economic justice and equality and continue demanding more. The IRA requires some of the nation's most profitable billionaire corporations and wealthiest citizens to begin to contribute a fairer share of taxes to reduce the costs of essentials for working families and to make critical investments and to save our planet from the devastation of climate change. Enactment of this legislation represents a historic rebuke of failed supply-side economics because our economy is doing so well now. Isn't that because of this? Isn't that just great? Hopefully, it signals an end to the 40 years of Congress cutting taxes on the rich and corporations based on a false notion that the benefits will trickle down to the working people. Elaine Applebaum, co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research, similarly described the IRS's tax provisions as a historic turn in tax policy towards greater fairness. The near doubling of the IRS Internal Revenue staff, plus resources to upgrade IT capacity, means the agency will be able to investigate potential tax fraud in complex Wall Street firms. IRS campaigns to crack down on private equity firms, improper use of management fee waivers for investors, and monitoring agreements with portfolio companies will no longer be stymied by a lack of resources. In other respects, however, Wall Street tycoons got off easy, thanks to right-wing Democratic Sinema, a top recipient of political cash from a staunch ally of the investor class. Empowered by the indispensable nature of her vote in an evenly split Senate, Sinema made her support for IRA contingent on the preservation of the so-called carried interest loophole, which prevents hedge fund managers and private equity moguls by allowing which benefits them, I should say, by allowing their investment income to be taxed at long-term capital gains rate of around 20%, rather than the ordinary top income rate of 37%, and the exemption of private equity-owned companies from the 15% minimum tax on billion-dollar firms. New Federal Election Commission's filings show that Sinema has received more than $500,000 in campaign donations from private equity executives during the current election cycle. And according to Open Secrets, the securities and investment sector as a whole has contributed more than $2.2 million to Sinema since she was elected to the Senate in 2017. Well, let's go through all of them. Well, we're running out of time here, and this just goes on saying the same stuff. Let's see what Robert Rish has to say, because he is talking about progressive. Every Republican just voted against enabling Medicare to negotiate the lower drug prices, empowering the IRS to go after super rich Dodgers, and taxing profitable corporations to invest in the people. And they call themselves the party of the working class. I just think it's so hypocritical for all of them. We can go on again. You know kind of what they're saying. That this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we're finally doing something to help people. It's just not true. Okay, so anyway, that's where we are, and I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. I appreciate you taking the time. This is where I should probably change this to the beginning, but I'm going to ask you to like and share, subscribe. I need your help to get this information out to people. So please like and subscribe. And remember, if you have IRS problems, if you owe the IRS money, if you don't know what to do, first thing you should do, get a copy of my book, Deal with Your IRS Problems Today. Go to freeirsbook.com, freeirsbook.com. Get your free copy of Deal with Your IRS Problem Today. We will ask for a small, for the shipping and handling fee, but the book itself and all of the bonuses are free. So go to freeirsbook.com and pay for just the shipping. So thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow is Crypto Tuesday. We'll be talking about crypto and blockchain and all that other good stuff. It's still very, very important, and it's still something you should know about. And that's why we're going to talk about it tomorrow. Join us, won't you?